Today is August 13th, 2020. The time is about 3 or 3:30. And I wanted to share something, and it was inspired by an interesting line of thought posited to me by someone very dear. Now, the idea begins with this. The idea in the upcoming election is that if the race is close and Trump wins, a recount will bring to light a huge number of ballots against Trump, leading to a loss. But if Trump wins in a landslide, there will be a huge push to claim that the entire thing is rigged, calling for a total recall. Now, in the first scenario, Kamala Harris will become president de facto without being elected, and Joe will dutifully die or be stricken in some way that incapacitates him as president. Kamala Harris hands the country over to communist socialism and corporate capitalism, and they win. And everyone suffers. Now, in the second scenario, there is so much confusion about the facts of the case, the landslide victory, that Nancy Pelosi becomes president in January by the fact that she's second in line, again, without a vote, and hands the country over to the communist socialists and the corporate capitalists, the ones that have been rigging all of this stuff all along on a global scale. I will get into that later. And everyone suffers. In the first scenario, Kamala Harris will silence dissenters by upholding the projection, mind you, of the rule of law by stating that because Trump cheated to win by a narrow margin, any reforms made during his 4 years as president must be repealed, thus returning to the end of Obama era, taking up the standard where Hillary was supposed to carry on the original plan. Now, in the second scenario, Nancy Pelosi will state that because Trump rigged the election and thus won in a landslide, all of the reforms made during his 4 years as president are null and void, and thus they will be repealed back to the Obama era. And Nancy Pelosi will pick up for Hillary Clinton at the 2016 point. The ends justify the means, okay? This is the same tactic that has been used for the whole of this 4-year-long battle, and in the ongoing war of the past 100 years. Heads you win, tails you lose. Or heads I win, tails you lose. Yeah, whatever. Whatever Trump does is wrong. Because admitting that one thing that Trump has done is right undermines the entire narrative that Trump is evil. And by extension, that anyone who supports the work he has done is likewise evil. In order to destroy righteous people, that's you and me. I believe that that's Trump standing up for us. And us standing up for us as well. In order to destroy a righteous man, you must first make it so that everyone believes that that man is evil, that that person is evil. And so there will be no sympathy for him. He will have nobody come forward in court and say, aha, I defend this man's case. I have been in that situation in my life. A number of times. Now, when Trump acts, it is outside of the will of the establishment. And this is the big problem. They have been doing things a particular sort of way for this past 100 years or so. And those things have worked out very nicely for them, the way that they want those things to work out. And this is why I call him a third-party candidate. He is the anti-establishmentarian of choice, and the only time in America's history that the anti-establishmentarian choice has been successful. Now, the fact that the same tropes about Trump are repeated so often without anything beyond self-actuating proof, that is, proof that is evidenced by the fact that it is repeated ad nauseum, is actually some of the best proof that he is not in fact evil. This has actually been stated by the MSM and the congressional powerhouses in so many words. Look at all the bad things people have to say about Trump. He must be evil if so many people keep having the same bad things to say about him. Again, this is exemplary of doublethink. This is doublethink. There is actual evidence that the people accusing Trump of wrongdoing are in fact guilty of a great deal of wrongdoing. And again, the same things of which they are accusing him, if you look at their records, you will find that they have been doing without fail throughout the entire time this establishment has been doing what it wants to do. Now, but again, this is ignored in the interest of protecting the narrative that Trump is bad. Because to admit wrongdoing negates the projection of wrongdoing in others. Notice that although Trump is accused of often making fun of those who present the narrative, he spends most of his time doing the job he was elected to do, whereas those who accuse Trump of making fun of them spend almost no time doing the job they were elected to do, and all of their time making fun of Trump. Orange man bad. Again and again, over and over. It's true. Now, the issue with a lot of these people that are making these accusations is the fact that they are lobbyist groups, they are unions, they are different kinds of conglomerates and corporations, and hell, the Chinese government itself, that are not elected, yet they control the narrative of what goes on in our lives. That's outright wrong. He is trying to level that playing field. It's up to us to try to level that playing field. Putting everything on one man's shoulders, that's just irresponsible, disingenuous, and downright lazy. Anyways, this leads me to my second point. The elements at play will conversely say that Trump has done nothing at all when the narrative calls for exposing his lack of doing anything, and that everything that Trump does is wrong when the narrative calls for exposing his habit of doing everything wrong. Doublethink insists that Doublethink insists that both must be necessarily true at any given time, or necessarily one or the other must not exist if one or the other be held as incontrovertible truth. And when a report is made concerning the former, the latter is dismissed as being a non-thing, and when a report is made concerning the latter, the former is dismissed as being a non-thing. Now, as an example, Trump passed the executive order to return children to school, to cut payroll tax, to disband the Federal Reserve, and to give back to the people their access to Social Security. This came following a defiantly recalcitrant Congress that demanded money be given to them to then distribute as they saw fit, rather than supporting the proven notion that people do best when given autonomy of thought leading to action. In this scenario, Congress claimed that Trump did nothing to help the economy, the people, or the country as a whole when they had a so-called perfectly reasonable bill on the table. It wasn't. It was $3 trillion of money going who knows where, and they had no expectation of it passing because they made it into a 1,700-page bill that nobody read, and they admitted publicly that the bill would not pass in the Senate, even if it did pass in the House. Following this, Nancy Pelosi showed an oversimplified chart of Trump's executive order, one which conveniently left out over $2 trillion of the plan she wanted to put forward in the first place. That is, by oversimplifying and ignoring the material evidence, she made it look as if Trump's executive order was overly simplistic, and thus proof of him doing nothing, or of doing only bad, whichever ends up supporting the means to the ends of the resistance. Whichever supports the means to the ends of the resistance to the establishmentarian end. Now, as to Trump doing things that make him bad, the same tactic is used, except with a neat twist. In this instance, the prison reform, tax cuts, immigration reform, job creation, et al. Is completely ignored, or the facts manipulated, according to the necessity of immediacy, on the basis that Trump is bad. Because Trump is bad, the good that he has demonstrably done in returning autonomy to the American people is completely wiped out as if it never existed. And the evidence that the MSM and Congress spend more of their time talking about how bad Trump is than they do on any other topic is given as proof that Trump is bad. This creates the illusion that Trump is bad because if everyone is always talking about it, it must be true, rather than obfuscation of the fact on the premise that Trump is bad because everyone in the MSM says that Trump is bad. Now, moving on. The reason that the Democrats have selected a racist old white man and a cop as their candidate against racist old white men and cops is to force one of two outcomes, both of which fall into the fallacy that the ends justify the means, regardless of the ethics or morality of the ends, and regardless of the ethics or morality of the means. Again, Trump is bad because the establishment says Trump is bad is simply a means to the ends of removing opposition against attaining the end. That is to say, if Trump is removed, the social utopia can attain its end without resistance. This is exemplified by Scenario 1 and Scenario 2, both of which, interestingly enough, require mail-in voting because COVID, and because everyone says that Trump is trying to rig the election by using COVID as an excuse. Doublethink. Because COVID is serious, and because they keep talking about how serious it is, which means that COVID is definitely serious. Or else, Trump wouldn't be using COVID to rig the election. That's the argument that's in use. Of course, this would be lunacy if we were talking about a worldwide pandemic just to keep Trump out of office. But that is not at all the case. The battleground here is a Cold War unlike any seen in history. And there's been a bunch of them, but this one is definitely the largest. Refer to my video on corporate capitalism and communist socialism for more detail on this point. The one cannot exist without the other, and according to unsustainable growth, power without limitation must seek to continually expand, or it will collapse under its own weight. Think about eternally expanding gases. They have to have containment, or they just dissipate into the universe and, cease to have the power that they once had. Now, Trump, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, and the President of Russia, and a number of other leaders of nations around the world are all third party. That is, duly elected by the people, but not approved by members of the main parties of their respective countries. The stage is much larger than just America, Great Britain, Ukraine, or Russia. Although, each are crucial to defying the efforts of this movement to control the means and results of the world at large. Consider this. This identical drama is currently playing out according to the same battle lines in these countries, but also in places like Australia, Germany, France, Yugoslavia, a lot of the Eastern Bloc in Europe, and Hong Kong. The establishment owns the product of China and the capital of the World Bank. Both are only stable as long as they are in complete control. But the fact is, neither is stable, and neither is in complete control of anything. Thus why both are on the verge of collapse. Despite how much they say that they are in control of everything, that everything's under control, and as much as that might seem to be true, then why do they keep on making the argument that they need more power and more control, or else we're not going to be happy? Although they're the ones making us miserable, and the ones that have been making us miserable. Now, unless they are successful on a global scale, the entropy of their unsustainable systems will inevitably collapse. This is classic wisdom according to an intimate study of former great empires, such as the Romans, the Ming and the Han dynasties of China, the Lydians, the Median Persian Empire, and of course the Holy Roman Catholic Church. All of their histories are identical to what is going on right now. So when you look at that in context, it starts to make a heck of a lot more sense. Now, all of this is to introduce to the dialogue a view that elicits a thoughtful response, rather than this unendingly disparate dialogue of diatribe. This is the issue that we have here, all right? We have the focus being on the means, but not the ends. We have the focus being not on the means at all and not on the ends at all, both simultaneously at the same time. And we have this focus that it is Trump that is bad, not the focus that Trump and all of us are in the way of world domination. And if you don't think that it's about world domination, then I recommend that you take a look at the 100 Years' War back during the 1600s. I suggest that you take a look at the 100 Years' War of the late BC, early AD era, when Rome was switching over from a republic to an empire, which they eventually won empireship. I suggest that you look at the Han and the Ming dynasties of China. Really get into it, not just a National Geographic, article or whatever, documentary. I mean, really get into it and study it with an open mind towards cause and effect. You have to do it with the ability to look at this stuff in a discriminatory light, with the ability to look at it with discernment, and to, yes, have a prejudicial system in mind where you think to yourself, perhaps history does repeat itself as a science. So, that's all I've got for right now, but there will be more to follow soon. So, anyways, I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful day. Stay classy. Thank you. God bless.